Day 3 of the NFL Combine from Indianapolis. Defensive linemen and linebackers working out, and Penn State edge rusher Chop Robinson turning heads with a 4.48 in the 40-yard dash. Real first name is Damian. His mother gave him the nickname Pork Chop at birth after weighing in at a beefy 14 pounds. He later slimmed down and shortened the nickname to Chop, and, well, he was chopping away at the 40-yard dash. His time of 4.48 seconds in the 40 is tied for the 6th fastest by a defensive end since 2013. Ryan Wilson has Chop going to the Houston Texans at 23rd overall in his latest mock draft. Can you imagine that? Chop and Will Anderson? Oh my goodness, that's nasty. Chop also had a broad jump of 10 feet, 8 inches, tied for the highest among defensive linemen and linebackers. And let's welcome in former NFL GM Rick Spielman and the aforementioned CBS Sports NFL draft analyst Ryan Wilson, who join us from Indy here to recap day 3 of the Combine. Rick, Chop Robinson stock, of course, rising after what you saw him do. Who's another player that stood out to you here on day 3?
I really thought Jared Verse helped himself, the defensive end edge rusher out of Florida State who transferred from Albany. He came in, he was 6'4", measured in well. He ran a 4.59. He was tops in all the vertical and broad jumps. And then when you watched him on film and you watch what he did in the workouts, it translated. You can see the quickness, you can see the explosion. And I think as these top 3, whether it's Dallas Turner, Jared Verse, or Latu, I think Jared Verse really did a great job and may be trying to make a move to be the #1 overall edge rusher and go in the top 10.
And all 3 of those edge rushers did pretty well when they performed today. I'm going to go with his teammate that played inside him frequently in the fall, a transfer also, just like Jared Verse was. He came from Western Michigan, Brayton Fisk, and we talked with him earlier in the week. He is a high-energy guy in interviews, and he is clearly high energy on the field. He ran a 4.78, which is moving pretty good. Had a 33-inch vertical, and you can see him here. And when you watch him play, the energy with which he plays, the passion with which he plays, and he talked a lot about that when we spoke with him. This is a big man moving, and this is exactly how he plays. He actually moves well side to side as well. Gives a lot of trouble to interior offensive linemen. And Rick, top 75 pick?
Yeah, he may end up sneaking himself in the first round with the performance from today.
Yeah, it was a great look for both him and his teammate Jared Verse, Hakeem.
Ryan, going back to Chop Robinson, I mean, this dude is moving. He's nicknamed Pork Chop at birth because he weighs 14 pounds. You know that's beefy for a baby. And you see him running after an opposing quarterback? I mean, my goodness. That's off the chart speed for that guy like that.
And, Rick, the thing we were worried about with Chop coming in, not necessarily worried, but maybe he was slightly undersized compared to the other edge rushers. He was 254, I believe, is what he came in at. The size is fine. The speed was obviously there. We thought he was going to test well. Hakeem mentioned I had him going 23rd overall to the Texans, and maybe that still feels about the range, but maybe he goes a little bit higher. Would you be upset if you got Chop Robinson opposite Will Anderson Jr.?
No, that would be a great combination. You got 2 guys that can really hum off the edge. I think the biggest knock on Chop Robinson was his size during the season, and that myth was dispelled or taken away today when he measured. But he didn't play really strong at the point versus the run. And I know everybody knows what kind of edge rusher he's going to be with the first step quickness, how he gets to the quarterback. But can he be a 60-snap starter and hold up versus the run as well?
Certainly his stock is on the rise. As for players who didn't help themselves out on Thursday, Rick, whose stock is falling after what you saw?
I don't want to say falling, and the reason I'm going to put this guy in that category, Darius Robinson, who just continued to get better, the defensive end out of Missouri, who can also play inside. When you walk off the bus with him, he's the first person you want the opponent to see. Long, he's athletic, long arms, plays with his hair on fire, and he had a great Senior Bowl, so he continued to rise. Then all of a sudden he comes here, measurables are great. He had a 35-inch vertical jump, but he ran a 4.95 40, and that may be some concern for some teams. And his 10 time, which everybody's looking for as a defensive lineman, was in a lower tier of all the defensive linemen. So the reason I put him in here, because his stock was rising, that I thought he was going to be in the bottom of the first round conversation. He'll still go high in the draft, maybe in the top of the second, but if he does not go in the bottom of the first, and let's say he goes in the top of the second, that's a $2 million difference in guaranteed money.
Let's call that the Joey Porter Jr. rule. because he went 32nd overall last year when there were only 31 picks in the first round, lost some money, ended up he probably should have been drafted in the first round, and you and I talk about this all the time, so I want to get your thoughts on this. If Joey Porter Jr. should have been a first-round pick, he was a little stiff in his movements here at the Combine a year ago, and that probably had something to do with it. If Brian Branch ran a 4.58 and that dropped him into the second round, he should have been a first-round pick. Why are we caring about the 4.95?
Just because of the first step quickness that you saw on tape. It didn't show up here at the Combine, and you have all this time to work between the Senior Bowl and after the season to get here to the Combine. And I'm not saying the teams are going to take him off the board or move him down the board. I'm just, when you're stacking the board, especially in the bottom of the first round, and I still think Kansas City could be a great fit for him.
Yes.
With the defensive lineman they have up there, and if they're able to retain Chris Jones, adding him to the mix would be great. But some teams are going to be concerned about the 40 time, which I think is a mistake.
Akeem, I'm going to go with Leonard Taylor out of the U. We talked about him over the summer, Rick and I did, when we did our summer scouting, and we had high expectations for him because of the athleticism. Didn't translate in the 2023 season. I don't know if he had injury concerns that we don't know about. Sometimes he played with his pad level too high and struggled to set at the point, and he struggled against these interior offensive linemen. Today, he did not run well. Ran 5.12. I mean, that's not the end of the world for an interior defensive lineman, but he had a 30-inch vertical, which is also average to a little below average. So that, coupled with the tape, gives me concerns, Rick.
Yeah, he did not play as well as his last year that he did the year before.
Right.
When we did him in the spring and fall or summer last year, we thought he was going to be one of the top 5 defensive tackles coming out. Didn't look like that on tape this year, and then a poor Combine performance. I could see him falling in the draft.
As for a guy whose stock continues to rise, Brock Bowers. Tight end set to work out on Friday, and Bowers is the top tight end in the 2024 draft class. He's been projected to go as high as 5th in the draft to the Chargers. Bowers was a nightmare matchup in Georgia. He can block. He's an elite pass catcher, making him a top priority for several teams that need a tight end. The Chargers, Bears, and Jets are among the bevy of teams that Bowers has met with at the Combine. As you see here, our Chris Trapasso has Bowers going to the Chargers at 5th overall, while Ryan Wilson has him going 14th to the Saints. All right, so back with Ryan and Rick, who spoke with Brock on Thursday at the Combine. And Rick, this is a very smart young man, a very talented young man. What were your takeaways from your conversation with him?
You know, when you sit there and talk with him, it doesn't translate to what you see on the field. Very soft-spoken. He's not physically imposing when he walked up here on the stage. And you're like, is this the same guy we were watching on tape? But when you put him on tape, he is an elite playmaker in the passing game. Excellent route runner, excellent hands. But the thing that impressed me the most is his run after catch ability. And it looks a lot like, is he a receiver or a tight end, what he's doing on the tape? The other thing that I think he really improved on this year is his run blocking. So he's not, as we like to say in a scouting term, a one-trick pony. I think he can do all phases to help a football team win, especially in the passing game.
And you see him there, and he just looks like, I sort of joke that he looks like he's working at his grandfather's hardware store. A good, wholesome young man. He's just working hard and stocking shelves. And then you see him on the football field, and a different player emerges. And Rick talked about this Auburn game. He had over 140 receiving yards. He actually rushed for a touchdown in addition to scoring the touchdown that you see here. And that's all over the tape when he's healthy. He had the ankle injury. When he came back, he was just as dominant, and a big part of why that Georgia team was so good. Rick, let me ask you this. He is a top 5 talent. Hakeem mentioned they had him going 14th in the mock draft just because tight ends typically go later, even than their talent might suggest. Would you take him 5th overall if you're the Chargers? There's an offensive lineman there?
If there's an offensive lineman there, and I know all these teams, and with especially a new regime coming in L.A. at the Chargers with Harbaugh and Ortiz, the new general manager, they're going to identify what fits their scheme. There's no question if he goes there or anywhere else, he'll be an instant playmaker for anyone who drafts him.
Well, Ryan, you know that Jim Harbaugh recruited Brock Bowers when he was at Michigan, and he obviously passed on the Wolverines, went to Georgia, helped them win a couple national championships. Now Bowers won't have a choice if Jim Harbaugh drafts him 5th overall. Might that play a factor when we have draft day exactly 2 months away?
I would imagine Brock Bowers will love the idea of catching passes from Justin Herbert. But I think to Akeem's other point, it feels like, based on what Jim Harbaugh has done in the past, the run game is going to be a big part of what they do, which brings us back to the conversation about maybe they take an offensive lineman if the idea is to help keep Justin Herbert upright, lean on the run game. They drafted Rashawn Slater and Zion Johnson, in previous drafts in the first round on the left side. They need to fix the right tackle position, but it's a good problem to have, Rick. You don't want to pick fifth overall, but if you have an opportunity to get one of those guys, it feels like a win.
Yeah, maybe Jim Harbaugh has sour grapes, and since you didn't pick me, I'm not going to pick you. You never know how this works out in the NFL draft.
Well, you remember Kyle Pitts a couple years ago. He went 4th overall. He was a man amongst boys. Brock Bowers, another situation here. Will that work out? That pretty good so far in Atlanta, but certainly room to improve. We'll see if Brock Bowers shakes out as a top 5 pick on draft day. Rick and Ryan here on CBS Sports HQ. Men, thank you. And for more from Rick and Ryan, check out their podcast With the First Pick, getting set to do another one, because that's all they do. Taking deep dives into mock drafts, prospect and position rankings, and stock watches. They get you set for the 2024 NFL Draft in Detroit, exactly 2 months away. With the First Pick, download and follow today.